Hello, I am Max and you're watching Cool Stuff in Weird Cars. In this video, we're taking a look at something a little bit different from what I normally look at, which is a 2019 Jeep Wrangler. This is a two-door version, and it is the Sport, so it's pretty much a base model. And I say it's a little bit different from what I usually do because it's new, pretty much. It's 1 year old and it's got about 7,500 miles on it, but most of the vehicles I feature on this channel are usually at least 10 to 15 years old, if not older. And I have decided that I might just delve into new cars a little bit here and there on the channel, just because there are a few that actually interest me, like this Jeep. But I would also like to shoot a Gladiator and just a few other kind of simple new vehicles. This exterior color is known as Mojito. It is quite possibly the good color for these, although I do like the teal blue one as well. And so we'll take the key, which is this giant thing here. It's got a few interesting things with it. First off, you have an actual key, which is useful to unlock the doors because this does not have powered locks. But that's it. That's the only thing this key has other than being a kind of a wireless receiver for the push button start. Being a base model, this Jeep does have just black door handles. As I mentioned, no power locks. And also no power windows on the doors. You do get a crank. You do have your door handle up here with a manual lock right here. Simple to operate. Door handle, which is nice and padded, and a little bit of storage down below. And being that this is a base model, it's going to have not really much of the luxuries at all that you could get on these Jeeps. Like, I'm sure you could get a much nicer door panel that's more padded. This one is not. It's only got padding on the armrest right here. But it's functional, and that's what really matters in something like this. This one is the automatic as well, 8-speed auto. I'd love to drive one that's a stick shift, but sadly I've not had that opportunity yet. Both front seats are completely manual. And as I mentioned, that key does act as a sensor for the car, so all you have to do is hit the brake, which I'll currently do, and you hit the button over here to start. And we'll go ahead and close this door and check out the rest of the interior, which is definitely at least a little bit interesting in this thing. But for starters, over here, you do have your headlight switch, which is very easy to operate. You have fog lights in the middle, as well as your gauge dimmer and interior lighting on the left side there. As you would expect, your turn signal stalk is right here. It's a little strangely placed because you have to like really reach for it because it's actually pretty far in from the steering wheel itself. So you got to pay attention to that while you're driving so you can actually get to it. But of course, turn signals, also interesting. The actual indicator for the turn signal is in the bottom of the gauges instead of the top, like most cars I've driven. Who knows why that is? On the steering wheel, you do have your controls for the center screen here, as well as cruise control on the right side, and a nice little Jeep emblem and a horn in the middle here. And I'll go ahead and run through a few of the screens here real quick with the controls here. So we are on fuel economy right now, which that is the average I've gotten off of a just mixed driving over about the last 100 miles I've driven this thing, which is pretty cool. It's getting 22.8 miles per gallon, which is not bad at all. There's actually two different things you can set for fuel economy. Both of them are actually 22.8, strangely enough. Trip info, which is just your trip odometer and various other information from the specific trip. Neither of these have been reset in a long time. It's been averaging 20.9 miles per gallon, or 20.8 over the entirety that this car has been driven, which is not bad at all for a brick with a pretty decent sized V6 in it. I actually have no clue what this is, but I know if you do this, it turns off. I don't know what it means by steering wheel must be straight, but this does have the automatic start-stop feature that whenever you stop at a stoplight or a stop sign, it will shut the car off until you let off the brake again. But we'll continue. We have our music off. Basically that just shows radio station that you're on, stuff like that. Pretty simple, straightforward. No stored messages, which will tell you, like, you know, if you need to get an oil change or something like that. Screen setup and your speedometer right there, as well as vehicle info, which you can see tire pressure, coolant temperature, trans temperature, oil temperature, oil pressure, oil life, which is at 19%, the battery voltage, and back to the tire pressure, which is very nice information to have. And back to the fuel economy where I started. Speaking of the gauges up here, these are like the nicest part about this interior. It's like the best styled part of the interior in my opinion. I really like them. You have a tachometer on the left, as well as your speedometer on the right, and your temperature and fuel gauges and actual gauges here in the middle. It's just nicely laid out, and they look really nice as well. And of course at the top of the screen, I forgot to mention that you do get a compass, your gear that you're in, which also changes with the manual mode on the automatic, as well as the outside temperature on the right, and your odometer on the bottom there. All in all, very nicely laid out, and very useful. Windshield wipers here on the right side, which you'll notice there's something missing on there, which I'll talk about here in a second. And that's pretty much it for over here besides the start-stop button. I'm guessing this is one step above like completely base radio that we have here, because my dad's 2018 Ram has one that's literally just buttons. It doesn't have a screen at all. I mean, it has a screen, but it's not a touch screen at all. But this is basically the exact same system that was in my dad's old 2013 Ram. It looks almost identical besides the fact that it's got a slightly different background for the Jeep. But it's simple to use. You can check out your media. It's very slow to respond, as you can tell. Don't want to pair a phone. You have a compass, which is just a nice big compass. Your settings for it. Simple to use. And there's a more option over here, which you can just turn on the rear camera without having to be in reverse, which is nice. You can see your outside temperature and a nice big clock. You do get a volume knob, which is nice, as well as a tune knob, which is very nice to have because I hate having everything on the touchscreen. You can mute it and also just turn the screen off. You just touch it and turn it on. Down below that is the climate control. One thing I like is that the recirculate button here doesn't have a picture of just any vehicle. It has a picture of a Jeep on it, which is in addition to a bunch of little Jeep Easter eggs that are all over this thing, but I'll get more into those later on in the video. And of course we have the auto start button, or turn it off I should say, for when you come to a stop, traction control off, and your hill descent control here on the right. And of course your extremely obvious other controls for the climate control. Very simple to use. Hazards below that, 12 volt power outlet down here, which Zach Pradel from Shooting Cars always mentions this, and I didn't really think about it before he started mentioning it, but on Chrysler vehicles, on these power outlets, you can see it has a key on it. That means that if the key is on, this will be powered no matter what. Otherwise, I don't think it has a specific thing on there, a specific graphic saying that it's not powered by the key. But you also have a USB-C, USB, and aux port on the right, which USB-C is actually pretty nice, even though I don't have anything to use it with, but it is pretty nice to have. A little bit of storage down below that, and also in the middle there that would normally have buttons if there were options. One thing I have to say about this interior is that besides right here on the steering wheel, besides this one spot, I don't really see anywhere that has any kind of fake buttons. If there were buttons, it was pretty much taken out to give you a storage area, which I think is very nice. Four-wheel drive transfer case here, and your shifter for the 8-speed automatic transmission, which I love the little Jeep on top of the shifter. It's very simple to shift. You go over here, you're in manual mode, and as I said, it does show which gear you're in here in the center screen. But we'll get more to that in the driving part of the video later on. And of course, as I mentioned, there is a backup camera. You just put in reverse, and the backup camera shows up with guidance lines, which is very nice. Cup holders back behind that. and an actual emergency brake, which is nice. I don't really like electronic emergency brakes myself, so it's nice to actually have a handle. You do get a dual layer storage here in the center console. Again, very nice feature. And up top you do get a manually dimming rearview mirror, as well as your little airbag off light. You do get a mirror, no lights, and that's about it. And so we'll shut it off real quick. Just hit the button and it shuts right off. Nice thing about these buttons is that if you don't hold the brake, like I'm currently doing, and if you hit this once, it goes to accessory mode. So, you know, it starts a screen up and also starts a radio up, and that's pretty much it. You hit it again, and it goes to run mode, where it basically, you know, it's like the different key positions on a normal car. And then, of course, if you hit it one more time and you hit the brake, it will turn on. If you just hit it again, it'll shut back off again. Very nice. But let's go ahead and check out the outside now. And so the JL generation of the Jeep Wrangler came out in the 2018 model year. Featured fairly new styling, as well as just a bunch of refinement over the previous JK. I personally like the styling. I like the turn signals over in the fenders, as well as the round headlights, which if you look inside of them, actually, I'll show you some real quick. There's a little Easter egg. There's a little Jeep grill in there, like actually on the light bulb itself, which is pretty cool. Of course, you have the 7-slotted grille, which is a trademark of Jeep's. Fog lights down below, which may have been an option. I'm not entirely sure, actually. But this is pretty much close to as base as you can get. It has the base model wheels, which are just painted black, matte black to be specific. And of course, with all older Jeeps, you can put down the windshield onto the little spots right there on the hood, giving you a true open air experience. And you could take the roof off, which is another thing that I want to talk about, because this roof is not factory. It is a Jeep branded, you know, roof, but this Jeep originally only came with a soft top. So this was added on by my parents, I think earlier this year pretty much. And it's just kind of a nice thing to have because it makes the inside nice and quiet, and it also holds in your climate control a lot better and just gives you a nicer driving experience on the highway and whatnot. And another thing, these step rails are also aftermarket. I don't think those were actually Jeep brand, but they are definitely not something that came on the Jeep whenever it left the factory. Of course, it does not have the color-coded fenders like a higher model would have. Another thing that I really do like about this new Jeep over the older Jeeps, which if you don't know, I actually drove a TJ generation Wrangler, so a 2004, for my last 2 years of high school, as well as a little bit after that. And it's much nicer. If you open the door here, the bottom of the door goes a lot lower into the bodywork, so you don't have to step over a huge thing to get into the Jeep, which was a huge problem I had with the old one, because, you know, you'd hit it and there'd be water on it or dirt or snow or whatever, and you get it all over your legs. But not with this. So I have no clue of how well you can see it, but another neat little old Jeep Easter egg on here is right here in the windshield. There's a little Jeep climbing up the side of the windshield, which is hilarious to me. And one last little thing for this side is that it's kind of funny because it's been like this for a while, but these Wranglers do have an exposed fuel cap right here on the side. I think definitely one of my favorite parts of the Jeep Wrangler is just how it's kept its boxy style over the years. Even now where all these SUVs are coming out and they're all aerodynamic and whatever, the Jeep Wrangler still stands as just a box. Interesting thing to note, the backup camera is here in the center of the spare tire. Which it works pretty well from there. And this one's especially boxy even compared to the older TJs and even the JKs. Way more straight angles. And I really wanted to film a two-door one of these just because you don't really see two doors that much. People are buying a lot of the four doors, and they have been since the JK came out. But I think the two-door is still probably the one that most Jeep people would want to get, for sure. It makes sense to me, at least. And so as I mentioned, the hood release is basically the same as older Jeeps. You just take that off, pull that back. Do the same here for the other side. There we go. And here a little release in here. Okay, so I just went ahead and opened this because it was extremely hot and I had to do it very quickly and I couldn't do it one-handed. So here's your engine. It's a 3.6 liter Pentastar V6. Makes about 285 horsepower, like 270 foot-pounds of torque, I think. It's not too shabby. It actually powers this thing pretty well, especially because it's the short one, the two-door, and it actually accelerates fairly well, which I'll talk about here in a second in the driving part. But it's not really much under here to say. As I mentioned, it gets like, I think they say it's like 17 and 20 something miles per gallon from the EPA, but not bad at all. And we'll check out the passenger side. These doors are actually kind of nice because they actually have stops in them that stop them at certain points. They're not just flying open like they were on the TJ. You're greeted by the word Wrangler here on your grab handle. And otherwise, do get a nice little glove box, which does have the owner's manual in it. Speaker right here. Grab handle up above as well. And still no lighting for your vanity mirror. And so, because I know you guys want it, I'm gonna try and get myself into the back seat. So, you have a strap here that you pull on that, actually, there's a thing up here. Look at that. There's a handle up on top. Fold the seat, and I'll go ahead and climb on in. Oh. Now, surprisingly, even though you can't see me from the camera because the window's tinted, there's actually not a bad amount of space back here at all. I'll pull the seat back just to see if I can actually do it. This is from the back. Ooh, yeah. There's not really much space. But there's actually a surprising amount of space back here. It's not bad at all. And thankfully, you actually get little vents back here as well, unlike the older Jeeps where you were just going to die of heat or cold in the back seats because there were no vents back there. But luckily we do have vents. We have cup holders down below, which is super nice. And there are only 2 seats back here, I believe. I don't think that it's made to have a third person back here at all. The headrests do fold down, which I'll show more once I show the back. And of course the speakers are up top, as well as the light, which I'll take this plastic off real quick because for some reason there's still plastic on the lights back here. So now I'll try and get back out, even though I stopped recording by accident, which shouldn't be too difficult actually. I'll just kind of do this and then I'm out. Cool. And the last thing I want to talk about real quick is the roof. So the back of the roof is kind of a pain to take off, so I definitely won't be taking it off. But the front here is actually pretty easy. You have these latches that are behind the sun visor there. You have a latch over here in the middle, latch over here in the back, and one more on this side. And once you do that, you basically just lift the panel off and then you can throw it in the back. I sadly have nothing to keep my hair in order, so I'm not going to actually do that, sadly. But it's a very nice feature to have, and it does on both sides too, of course. And we'll check out the cargo area. Simple to open. Handle right here. Push this all the way open, as well as the window, which you just lift up. There's a little bit of space back here. Not too terrible. As I mentioned, you have rear headrests, which of course you can push down, which I think this might do it. Yeah. So you pull on these little straps and those fold down. And then also, you pull up on this and push forward, and the seat folds forward, which leaves you actually quite a bit of room. And even more so, there is some storage under here, as well as all your little bolt holes for all the bolts for the roof, which is fantastic. You do get a power lift back here, which is very nice, which is on all the time according to the little battery emblem or battery icon right there. You can actually see the roll cage that this thing has while I'm standing back here, but I'll leave that as it is. Go ahead and close this back up, and we'll close this. Okay, and so now it's time to drive the 2019 two-door Jeep, which I'm kind of excited for because, like I said, a lot of the videos on these on YouTube are of nothing but the four doors. And there's quite a few Gladiator videos and stuff like that. But I don't think that the two-door, and especially in very basic form, gets much love. So, yeah, let's get going. Now the first thing you'll notice whenever you drive this thing is the actual pep. Like I was saying, that 285 or so horsepower that this engine makes definitely is more than enough to scoot this thing along. Like, ooh, that was a rear seat. That scared the hell out of me. But the thing, but the power is a really surprising part of this thing. And the transmission, I have to say, even though I'm usually auto start, stop that. The transmission, I would usually harp on an automatic and something like this, but I would love to drive the 6-speed because I have no clue how it really feels. But this 8-speed automatic actually isn't too bad. The only thing is that I don't see anybody using this to manual shift for one specific reason, that's just there's too many gears. Like, I've tried to mess around with it and I'm like, 8 gears is way too many. I get stuck with just trying to figure out, you know, if I'm in like 7th gear or 4th gear or whatever, it's very strange. I feel like a 6-speed automatic would have been perfect for if you wanted to shift it yourself, but yeah, this one's just a little too many. But the actual transmission itself, it doesn't take too long to shift. It does hesitate a little bit here and there, but it doesn't actually take that long to shift in general. And it does a pretty good job at figuring out what gear you want to go down into if you just hit the gas out of nowhere. And you know, when you have your cruise control on the highway, of course, even though this thing does have a decent amount of power, it's still shaped like a loaf of bread. So it definitely needs to shift down sometimes whenever you're going up and down hills, at least, you know, here in Missouri where there's a lot of hills on the highways. And it actually does it well. It figures out which gear it is. It never slows down more than like 1 mile per hour slower than the cruise control, which is a lot better than something like my Intrepid could say with its 4-speed automatic, and it just takes forever to shift down, and then by the time it does, you're just about to the top of the hill anyways. But it's not a bad experience overall. But otherwise, other than the transmission, there's some strange kind of placements of things, I guess. I don't know if I might have the seat a little bit too far forward, because my mom was driving this and she's definitely not 6'2" like I am. But the pedal, where your right foot sits on the pedals, it just makes my foot tired because the pedal's very upright. And after a little bit of driving and after trying to hold my foot in a certain spot, it starts to get just tired, basically. I know it's a very small thing to complain about, but I've not had this problem on like my Ram, my Intrepid, my Celsior, any other car that I've driven a lot, even the older Jeep maybe. I don't remember specifically because it's been years and years since I've driven that thing a lot. But it's an awkward position to be in. And then also I mentioned the turn signal stalk being in a strange spot because it's like really far in from the back of the steering wheel. But I just remembered I didn't even talk about basically one of the best features of this entire Jeep, which even though this has a pretty basic radio in it, it does have the controls on the back of the steering wheel for the radio. So on the left you have your volume. It's 3 different buttons. You have your volume up and down, and then actually I think it's tune on the left and it's volume on the right. But you can also go through your presets with the button in the middle, and on the right side the button in the middle changes from AM to FM. So it's so nice because they're right where you need them to be. It's right at the back of the steering wheel, perfect length for at least my fingers to get to, and to be able to just rest on them, and then, you know, I can basically do anything that I want with the radio from the steering wheel instead of having to go over here and try and figure it out there. And it's nice. I'm sure if you have a phone plugged in or something, you can change the tracks and stuff, but I have not done that with this Jeep yet, so I couldn't tell you. But one of the nicest features of this thing for sure, and something I'm gonna be sad to live without, because my Intrepid could have had it. Those cars had the option of having steering wheel controls, but they didn't. And it's a lot better than the ones on the face of the steering wheel, because you have to think and look at the ones on the face. On these, you just put your fingers in certain spots, and it's night and day difference. But there's a few other things, like there's a few new car things that I'm not really a fan of on this thing. The auto start stop I don't like. I feel like it's just gonna cost you money in starters, and it's not enough of a... Actually, let's get some acceleration. It's actually, it pulls you back, especially if you floor it. It will pull you back in the seat, surprisingly. But yeah, I just don't see the point of auto start stop, honestly. It doesn't seem like it's gonna save you enough money to, you know, say, you know, use your starter 20, 30, 40% more than it should be. But it's something to turn off at least, which I'm grateful for. There's the screens, which I'm not a huge fan of screens, touch screens and stuff, but I've already went over the radio. This one's definitely better with the controls on the back of the steering wheel. The screen in the middle of the gauges is actually really nice because it's not very distracting, but it gives you a lot of information. I don't like the fact that if I just tap the turn signal stalk slightly down or up, it makes it makes the turn signal blink like 4 times or whatever. Don't really like that. I'd rather be in complete control of what my turn signal is doing. And also with the same stalk, with your brights, if you push on it, it turns on your brights. It's not you pull the flash, push to turn them on. And the part that I find annoying about that is, let's see that real quick. The problem I find with that is the fact that when you push it to turn them on, it goes back to the center position. So you can't just quickly flick them back towards you, like I did with my LS400 and also my Celsior, where you just kind of tap it and it goes back to its normal position and your brights turn off. On this, you have to actually either pull it or push it. I think either one of those will turn off the brights. Just kind of annoying, not something I'm a huge fan of. Like, I'd much rather just have a simple lever instead of a button, basically, to turn on and off the brights. But otherwise, I don't know, it's nicer than the old Jeep for sure. It's much more livable than the TJ Wrangler I was driving, which I want to do another video on that, but it needs some work and it needs to be inspected for me to even drive it at all. So be on the lookout for that sometime in the future. Not anytime very soon though, probably. But this thing is just, it gets 21, I'm at 21 miles per gallon now after about 100 miles of driving, which was a lot of highway driving. There's also some stop and go and also some just back roads and stuff like that. But 21 miles per gallon out of a Jeep, out of a Wrangler, is incredible to me. I'm sure if you put a diesel in one of these, it would do better, but just having a decent sized V6 and getting 21 miles per gallon average is not bad at all. That old Jeep, I think the best it ever got on the highway was like 16 miles per gallon at most. I think my Ram gets better gas mileage than that Jeep does. And it's also, you know, it's better to drive. The transmission is just super wonky in the old one, the automatic transmission. And, you know, the climate control doesn't work as good, the radio isn't as good, the speakers aren't as good, so on and so forth. So it's definitely a quality of life increase to the newer one. It's a lot more expensive, of course, but you can find an older, you can find a JK. I don't actually know much about JKs because I've never driven one. I'd like to drive one in the future, but I feel like you could probably skip all the older Jeeps and go to one of these and you'd be pretty happy. Because it does still have the off-road capability that all the older ones had. Nothing really changed there at all. Like, you just put a set of all-terrains in this thing because it just currently has some normal road tires on it. But you put some better, see, there we go. I tried to turn off the turn signal to stop moving over and I accidentally pushed it down too far and it went to the left one. I don't like that. But it's just, yeah, it's just a lot nicer. You can see better at night because the headlights are better. I don't know. There's a lot of things that you could say are better about this than an older Jeep. Sure, you're paying a premium over an older Jeep, but I think that might be worth it myself. Because even like the visibility is perfectly fine on this thing. It might even be better than the older Jeep. Just looking around me, I can see perfectly out the back window, out the side windows. There's only a little bit of blind spot right here. Then that's because there's an airbag there, and you know, part of the roll cage is there. But the old Jeep had smaller windows on the sides. I think even the windshield's easier to see out of this thing. It's just better. I would much rather drive this overall than that old Jeep, is what I'm saying. Sure, you might have problems down the line with the automatic transmission and the engine, but you know, those older Jeeps, even with the 4.0s, they're still known to have problems here and there, and they're definitely far from perfect. And you'll have transmission problems and who knows what else. But I can just drive down the highway in this thing, and there's not much wind noise that you can hear. Definitely more than some of my cars I've driven, but it's also a Jeep with removable roof. Can't ask much more for that. And so I think that will conclude this video of the 2019 Jeep Wrangler Sport 2-door. Thank you all so much for watching. If you want to support me in any way, you can check out my social medias in the description below, as well as my Patreon, which Patreon gets videos a few days early compared to YouTube. So if you want to see stuff early and you also want to see stuff like I'll take pictures of whatever I'm filming or whatever, check that out on the Patreon. Only $2 a month, and that will be yours. And of course, I post a bunch of stuff on like Twitter and stuff, so you can follow that too. But for the most part, I think that's about it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I shall see you in the next one.